The title, Storm King Art Center, does not adequately describe the scope of this place. We are as much about landscape as we are about sculpture. 40 years has been spent creating hills for the sculptures, planting trees, creating meadows, and above all, outdoor rooms for the sculptures. The walls of these imaginary rooms were the trees, the roof was sky. The carpet, the floor was the grass or the fields. And also when you looked out of the windows of these imaginary rooms, you saw the mountains that formed what I call the green walls of the Art Center. I thought of our space as a series of outdoor rooms. You had the feeling of going from one room to another, of going from one sculptor's room to another sculptor's room. The sculptors taught us a great deal about landscape. First of all, David Smith.
The outdoors has more to do with the stainless steel. It's just a natural alliance. I intended the reflective surface to be part of the concept, so that that brightness reflects the hard blue of a noon sky or the golden of an afternoon sun. It's sometimes the green in mountains gets in.
When we acquired David Smith sculptures after he died, we had not opened these long vistas. The building was still surrounded by woods. It was only later, as the Art Center had expanded and the views to the surrounding mountains were opened up, and that we built a special hill for the Smiths so that they could be grouped somewhat the way they had been at Bolton Landing, also with long views into the mountains. Marc Dusouvreau has a fantastic eye for placing sculpture. Marc was wonderful in selecting sites and did unusual things, diving down below a hill. No other sculptor would have done that at that time.
You realize that it needs a certain kind of a scale and a kind of a setting for the piece really to breathe, to reach its maximum transmission.
So Marc stunned me because they interacted, the sculptures together, made like one gigantic sculpture world. And this worked so perfectly.
I built most of the pieces in junkyards, in scrap situations, farms, wherever I could. When they all got together in Storm King, they had this resonance between them.
And it set them off, it made a special area for them, and they looked great from above. It was a different experience seeing them from below.
And to have them come together was very interesting for me. It was a kind of an electricity. What was really nice is that they looked kind of familial. Suddenly, there was this kind of family grouping.
Both for the sake of the sculptures and for the sake of the outdoor experience, it was wonderful to draw people into the valley. When Isamu Noguchi came here, his vision, and mine also, had been that this would be a great viewing area from which one could look into the small exhibition area next to the building where the Smiths were, but also where you could look into the distance in the north. It was the perfect spot for this. When we started talking to Richard Serra about placing a sculpture up here, Richard came out and took me way down, it seemed near the horizon, and showed me a field.
I found this farming field at the edge of the property, and I liked it. I felt very much at home here. I felt that this was a farming field that was untouched, and the movement of the land would enable me to participate in some thoughtful degree with it.
Richard said, this is where I'm going to put the sculpture. And I opened my mouth to say no, but the words that came out were terrific because it flowed right. But then doubts overcame me. I said, but nobody's going to walk this far out here. And Sarah said, people will come. And indeed they did.
August 1991. Richard Serra creates a sculpture of a Storm King farm field with steel plates.
I had seen in Europe Richard Serra's outdoor installations, which were remarkable. He was a person extremely sensitive to every fold, every roll in the land.
The whole here is really the interaction of one's perception and experience of walking into and through the land, where the plates just augment the land and allow you to perceive it.
I had seen in his works a kind of modesty to augment the land and bring out its qualities.
So, in some sense, this isn't an autonomous sculpture where you stand and look at a specific thing. Basically, what you have to do is walk the entire field, and the whole of the field with the elements in it become the sculpture.
In the early years, I had the great good fortune to work with my partner, our founder, Ralph Ted Ogden, until his death in 1974. One great moment occurred in 1962 when Ted was placing a sculpture here with such pleasure and thinking both of the practicalities, the concrete base and the exact siting and drainage and the view and how it would work with the trees. And I felt this is our beginning. This was the combination of sculpture and landscape, and one reinforcing the other. That was one very great moment. The land had been devastated by the building of the New York State Thruway. When the New York Thruway came here to build, they'd used this property as a gravel bank. They scooped up all this gravel and more and dug down deep. It was beautiful gravel. At the time we arrived here, a huge area gouged out by 2 million yards of gravel. When Ted and I looked out from what is now the parking lot by the building, we saw a sort of a big mud hole, over 60 feet deep. The remnants of a gravel bank went straight across the valley. 40 years has been spent putting this all back in a creative manner. And we've been able to do all of this because we started from scratch. We spent 5 years building up a hill on the east side, the back side of the museum building. We brought a lot of gravel in and built a hillside, and we called that hillside the Calder Hillside. We changed some of the sculptures, but the hill works perfectly for them. It's at a distance from the Art Center, it's yet within easy access. Bill Rutherford wanted to start letting some of the grasses grow long because we couldn't mow everything, and it looked like a sort of crew-cut golf course. So we started to let some fields grow up, and I said, Bill, you got to cut some paths through there to lead people to the sculptures. I was thinking of a 3-foot path. Well, Bill started creating these enormous swaths, 20, 30 feet wide. I thought, my God, that's some path. But the minute he did it, people started walking up. It worked like a charm. And we immediately got really into beautifying the contrast of the tall and the short grass. It's a 7-year program. Eventually, long grasses, they'll weave in the winds and be colored by wildflowers. That we can introduce flowers like those that already have started to grow here that will soon cover the whole rest of the Art Center, which will add to the feeling of serenity and beauty, and which will integrate with our fields and our sculptures.